It's a wonderful gift, so thank you very much. And thank you for coming here. There we go. If I could just see a show of hands if this is your first time to the Alliance Center, please. All right. Well, thank you very much for the newcomers for joining our community and for all the familiar faces that we've seen so many times. Sincere gratitude for your continued support of our work. I always do like to start with some gratitude, so thank you very much, Governor Hickenlooper, for your leadership over the years, and an official welcome back to the Alliance Center. Thank you very much to the Honorable Beth Gantz for being our moderator this evening. The Honorable, that's right. And to our esteemed panel, all of which you'll get to know here in just a few moments. Thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. We have a beautiful summer evening outside, and you've chose to come spend the evening with us, and that means something. And it's also worth being stated at this point that we do have a live streaming and TV audience tuning in all across the state of Colorado. So thank you to those of you tuning in online. And thank you to Denver Open Media Foundation for making that happen. We also want to give a note of gratitude to our sponsors, Eco Products and Great Divide, for their support of our event. And I wouldn't be complete in my gratitude without thanking Environmental Entrepreneurs, our collaborative partner for this evening. Also a note of gratitude to our VIPs. We have State Representative Mike Wiseman in house. We also have the current chair of the PUC, Mr. Jeff Ackerman, and the past chair of the PUC, Mr. Ron Benz, as well as Martha Rudolph from CDPHE. And also thank you to Alliance tenants who are here tonight and Environmental Entrepreneurs members. Thank you very much for your support. With that off my chest, I think it's in time to officially introduce myself. My name is Brenna Simmons St. Ange, and tonight is a particularly sweet evening for me, as it is the first time I can officially welcome you here as the Executive Director of the Alliance Center. Thank you very much. The Alliance Center's mission is to create a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future. And for us, we define that as one where our communities are inclusive, our democracy is strong, our economy is thriving, and our planet is healthy. And while that's certainly a beautiful vision of a wonderful world I want to leave to my children and grandchildren, it's a world we cannot accomplish without strategic collaboration. And that is the backbone, the foundation of everything we do at the Alliance. And we serve this vision through collaboration through three top driving goals: greenhouse gas emission reduction in Colorado through an equity lens, intentionally cultivating and curating the sustainability network to be representative of the diverse demographics in Colorado, and growing the corporate social responsibility movement to help companies deepen and measure their environmental and social impacts. Tangibly, we serve this vision through our building, using this building that you're in right now as a learning, living laboratory. It's an incubator for innovation, constantly pushing the limits for what's possible in green building design, while not losing sight of the aesthetics and the human experience, the wellness of the community that this building supports. We also serve our mission through our network, which starts with our tenants. There are about 50 organizations that work here every day to work towards that sustainable vision of an inclusive and equitable future. And it is through their work that we are constantly pushing the needle and making the much needed change in our beautiful state and beyond. We also serve our mission through our programming. And through our programming, we use our convening power of our network to pull together stakeholders from government, nonprofit, academia, for-profit, community leaders, and grassroots mobilizers to drive strategic collaborative solutions for some of the largest problems we face in our environment, our economy, and our communities. At this point in the evening, I do want to introduce Susan Nadell, who's a Rocky Mountain advocate for environmental entrepreneurs. And Environmental Entrepreneurs is a national nonpartisan group of business owners and investors who are advocating policies who are good for the environment and good for the economy. Susan has an exciting announcement this evening.
Thank you, Brenna, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's an exciting evening. For many of you who do not know, we are a national organization, and we have 9 chapters across the country, and the Rocky Mountains chapter was started 11 years ago. And we hope that you will we also do sponsor events, and many with the Alliance Center. So we're very glad you're here. Today, we are releasing our third annual Clean Jobs Report for Colorado, showing there are over 57,000 clean energy jobs in the state, people who work 100% in the clean energy economy. 55% of those are in energy efficiency, 30% are in renewable energy, and Colorado ranks number 7 in the nation for renewable energy jobs. So hats off to Colorado. Finally, there are clean energy jobs in all 64 counties, so that's good news for our entire state. And you can pick up a copy later, it's somewhere floating around, or you can go online at e2.org/reports to see it online and save paper and be more sustainable. And the other thing we'd like to mention is that we'd love to have you make your voice heard and sign our Clean Jobs Count webpage. The pledge is online, and it's at cleanjobscount.org. And over the next year, E2 will be documenting actions taken throughout the country, showing that clean jobs count. And with that, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Susan. Really a wonderful announcement, and if memory serves, I believe this is actually the 3rd year that this report has been released at an Alliance Center event. So again, we really value the partnership with environmental entrepreneurs. Before we get into the subject matter of the evening, I'm going to take just a few moments to tell you, as you hopefully know, that we are in an unprecedented Colorado primary election right now. All of you should have received your ballots in the mail. If you haven't, look into why and make sure you get it, and please participate. Vote, 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 vote all the way down the ballot, get educated around the candidates, because this is the way that we can help influence the outcome of November's election. And it's the first year that unaffiliated voters can participate in this process in the state, and that's particularly powerful because they are the majority in Colorado. There are more registered unaffiliateds than there are Republicans or Democrats. So thank you for bearing with me on that. The last thing I'll say before I pass it over to our moderator is just a housekeeping note on questions this evening. Because of the size of our audience and because of our live audience tuning in online, we're going to be taking questions 2 different ways. One way is to get on Twitter. So pull out your phones, get online, and tweet your questions with hashtag #COClimateAction. It's right here, hashtag #COClimateAction. That's probably the best way to get your questions to us this evening. You can also write your questions on an index card if that's more comfortable to you, and we'll be passing those to the moderator at designated points throughout this evening. With that, I'd like to introduce to you our wonderful moderator, Beth Gantz. Since 2007, Beth Gantz has served as a Vice President for Public Affairs and Sustainability at Vail Resorts. In this role, she oversees the company's government relations at the national, state, and local level, as well as the company's community relations, corporate stewardship, environmental compliance, and sustainability programs. Previously, she held many political and nonprofit positions in both Colorado and Washington, D.C. She has served as the executive director of America Votes, as well as NARAL, and has the honor of serving on many nonprofit boards, including the National Forest Foundation and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. And without further ado, I give to you Beth Gantz and Governor Hickenlooper.
Thank you. Thanks, Brenna. Gosh, it's so good to be here. I don't know how many years ago it was that I picked up the phone and it was John Powers saying to me, hey, I need you to come see this place and move your organization here. And it looked a lot different than it looks today, and it's just awesome. And I'm just thrilled to be back at the Alliance Center, and this is just an amazing opportunity, and how it has grown and become such a force, really, in the Colorado community is really impressive. So congratulations to all that have made it that. I'm thrilled to be here talking about an issue that is near and dear to my heart, near and dear to the heart of all of us at Vail Resorts. Actually, our resorts, as most of you will know, are in some of the most iconic locations across Colorado. And we take very seriously our stewardship and our responsibility to help preserve and protect the natural environment. So now I get to introduce you. I will keep it very short. We're really lucky tonight to have Governor Hickenlooper here, and I'm, so thrilled to share this and get to ask him questions tonight because, there are a lot of tough issues around climate, and it's a tough issue in and of itself, and how it's impacting both Colorado and the globe is very serious. And taking the leadership role that he did a year ago with the other governors in the Climate Alliance at a really important time for the country was terrific. And so thank you for that. And then with the Colorado Climate Plan, and we're going to hear a lot of details about that later tonight with the panel. But making sure that we set the state on a really good path on this really critical issue. So thank you. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. Governor Hickenlooper, I'll let you say a few words.
Thank you, and thanks for all that Vail does. It's great to have a corporation that is invested in sustainability and climate the way Vail Resorts is. I also want to, and I don't know where he went, where John Powers go, but anyway, who actually, this building is his creation, but when he came upon, decided to create this thing called the Alliance Center, it was actually owned by myself, and my partner was Joyce Mescus, who at that time owned the Tattered Cover. And so we were thinking, well, and I was just been elected mayor, and we were just thinking about we didn't need this whole big building, and along came John Powers and said, imagine a building filled with all the different nonprofits that were all focused on building a sustainable future for the globe, for the planet. And I think I said something lame like, well, you should get some other nonprofits because you want to keep bringing people into the fold. And he patted me on the back, but he did it. He had a couple. I don't know of another. I know there are a number of centers where there are gathering places for nonprofits of a specific vision, and even I know of a few others that are similar in terms of their focus on climate. I don't know anywhere that has this the rigorous approach that they are living. They're walking their talk. They're living the vision. How do you create a sustainable, workable future? Also want to recognize Mike Lewis is here. He's the head of CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, they have become such a great partner. You talk to anybody who cares about bike trails, alternative transportation, doing a better job of planning a mobility future. He's really in the process of turning that entire culture around. And did we say, where is Taryn? Is Taryn Finnessy? Oh, right in front of me. Taryn Finnessy is with our Department of Public Health and the Environment, and she was my guide. I went to Paris for the 2-year anniversary of the Climate Paris Accords. And myself and Jerry Brown were the two sub-national representatives. And so she went and dug through all the, you cannot imagine the bureaucratic challenges when they're doing one of these international things, but she was spectacular. Just want to make sure she got recognized as well. And we already recognized Martha and Jeff. Do we recognize Kathleen? The head of the Colorado Energy Department, Kathleen Stacks. My gosh. What's the matter with us?
It's coming later.
All right. That's all I've got to say.
That's it? Okay. You ready for the questions?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll start.
Do I get a buzzer?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great idea. Where's Brenna? So we'll start high level. What do you see as the greatest challenges for the state of Colorado as we face climate change in terms of mitigation, adaptation?
So we have several great challenges. One of our challenges, like everyone in the country right now, is the unpredictability of what's coming from Washington, both in the Congress and in the White House. And I think that makes any plan that we create vulnerable. So that's one serious problem. Second is we are the highest state in America, and I'm not talking about pot. But if you look at our overall elevation, and I always say that, you know how Texans are so proud of themselves, but if you draped a piece of magical silk over every mountain and down, covered every valley in the entire state of Colorado, and so every surface was draped, and then somehow magically you could pick it up and stretch it out, right? Our area would be larger than Texas.
Sweet.
Just as a frame of reference. But we are higher, our air is thinner, the geography and the exact form of our mountains and how they affect our weather patterns and especially our precipitation appear to make us very vulnerable as climate change begins to shift traditional patterns of precipitation and climate in different directions. Most of the plans, 90% of the climate change plans I've ever seen, end up having Colorado getting less moisture, less precipitation. And when you couple that with the fact that half of our water storage is in the form of snow, so you're gonna have less precipitation and then it's warmer, so more of it doesn't come down as snow, doesn't get stored in the mountains, then we've got some real challenges to maintain a lot of what we've relied on, both in terms of growing our food and having traditional agricultural traditions.
I know something about weather variability.
Well, and if you're going to have a statistical analysis of weather variability, certainly that, let's say you call it the Q factor, that's going to go through the ceiling.
So many in this room, right, and including you and your team, have already taken so many actions. But what if there were 2 or 3 top actions, right, that the state could take, and that all of us could do together to address climate change? What would they be?
So there are a lot of things we're doing, right? The Colorado Climate Action Plan has got a lot of, it's like, I guess you could say it's a loose form of a cookbook. But there's a lot of things that are laid out there. But I think beyond that, we should be looking at, how do we mobilize the smaller communities across the state? How do we figure out some sort of a branding so that they, by participating in meaningful, aggressive action to reduce their emissions, they can kind of show off to tourists, people that are going on bike trips or hiking, whatever, when they go through these small cities. There should be a way that they can claim benefit for participating. And I remember when I first became mayor, and a woman named Beth Conover, who works for the Gates Foundation now, but she came in and was our head of sustainability. And we came up with basic stuff like planting trees on the south side of buildings for low-income housing projects. And it takes 5 or 10 years for them to grow, but a shade tree, if you're talking about a serious shade tree like an oak or a resilient elm, a maple, the amount that lowers air conditioning, making sure you have shade trees along where people park their cars. So when they get in their cars, they're not raging hot and they don't always max out on their air conditioning. So that kind of connecting all, so we did a summit last year where we had, counties and municipalities from all over the state come together and say, all right, what are our best practices? I think that's important. Second thing, which the whole state can do, I think we should be talking more aggressively when we're talking about sustainability and climate change. We should be talking about outdoor recreation, right? That's a natural alliance that is kind of in there and around us, but it has not been clearly laid out, and we have not looked at what are their political opportunities. And I think one thing that I'll just throw this in, we should be cautious about using language and taking actions that further divide the country and get everyone yelling at each other. I think there's so many things we can be doing right now, and especially outdoor recreation, that really drive home the fact of what we're all about and do it in a way that's not making somebody wrong. And we had the day before the outdoor recreation industry had their big convention here at the end of January. First time in 22 years it was in Salt Lake City. And so we bid very aggressively because we thought that outdoor recreation was a big part of the identity of Colorado, and we thought that it could be a part of how we address climate action. Anyway, there were about 65 executives and leaders of the outdoor recreation industry that came in a day early to work on what will become the Colorado Accords. And the basic premise was the outdoor recreation industry would have focus on public lands, clean air, and clean water, right? We're not even going to talk about climate change. We're just going to focus on those 3 non-divisive terms that almost everybody believes in and say, all right, how do we get people fired up about that? And so in that one day with these 65 executives, they came up with 4 frameworks. One is around economic development. Again, clean air, clean water, public lands, outdoor recreation, obviously have all kinds of applications of creating jobs. But then also, the second one was conservation and stewardship, which obviously leads right into climate. And then education and training was the third framework, and then the last one was public health and wellness. But each of these, if you squint your eyes, what you're really talking about is different ways of addressing climate. Will have an impact on that. And I think that's something that long term, we start here and, everyone thinks, well, but they're not political. We're not asking them to be political. We're just saying, how can we help you speak out for clean air, clean water, public lands? REI, so Jerry Stritsky, the CEO of REI, has been doing a lot of this work and helping organize it and financing the meetings. And REI is now up to 17 million members, right? You want to talk about an allegedly nonpartisan, and it is nonpartisan, political organizing arm is the National Rifle Association. They're 5 million, and REI is 17 million. So this is a place where we, again, it's not about proving someone right or someone wrong, but it's getting people moving in a new direction and getting them kind of excited about what they can do.
So along that vein, in terms of the that was bringing private industry together, and then the symposium that you hosted, right, was bringing local governments together. As you've traveled the state, and the combination of those two things, right, having action from industry, having action from local governments across the state is so key to really building resilient communities across Colorado. So, the OIA is a great example. But where have you seen businesses across the state with really innovative ideas in terms of how they're looking to make an impact, move the needle, be a leader in the space for others?
Flat out everywhere, right? When you go across the state, and especially, climate change will have a disproportionate negative effect on the smaller communities, and especially the ones that are economically challenged. I think if you were to take away one big lesson to take away from the elections of 2016 is that we have a divide between the rural parts of America and the urban/suburban parts that's much deeper than most people had recognized or really talked about. I think that rural Colorado and I think rural America is filled with innovation and ideas and these small communities. I love going, when you go into rural towns in Colorado, check out their library. Everyone says libraries are going to die, libraries are not doing well because of technology and everybody can Google. That's blarney. And that's a very polite way of saying it.
Technical term.
Libraries all over the state are evolving and still becoming meeting places where people exchange ideas and get information. And they're a perfect place where if we're really going to start talking about kind of a bottom-up groundswell around climate change, in small towns, a library is a perfect place for that kind of thing to start. So, I'm trying to think of places like that. Their business, where are the taxi guys from Grand Junction who are here? What's the name of your company, K2? K2 Taxi. These guys are building a taxi company in Grand Junction with, they've already got 8 electric vehicles. They're gonna be all, they've got like 16 or 15 taxis. 8 are electric right now, and they're gonna be all electric by like 2020, right? Rock out.
That's awesome. So I know we're live streaming. I could ask you questions all night, but I feel like there are a lot of people here.
Here come the questions.
Here come the questions.
This is called Stump the Stooge.
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's just mean.
I was mean to myself.
No, in terms of how old I've gotten and how much I might need my glasses, but we'll try to. No. We'll try to get through. Okay. What good news? Literally, what good news can you give us about efforts? To convert light passenger vehicles to electric? Can we hope to see less smog in the coming years and reduce CO2 emissions?
Absolutely.
I think is what that says.
No. I think that the future for electric vehicles is very bright, and there's a lot of talk in Washington that they're going to roll back the low emission vehicle goals, right? The high mileage, high fuel efficiency vehicles, and I mean, if that happens, the minute they do that, and maybe just for the heck of it, before they do that, maybe tomorrow, who knows? But I think we stand ready, and we're not the only state that says we're going to stick right with the plan that was already adopted and agreed to by the federal government and planned by California.
Thank you.
And I don't. You can do a show of hands. You think we should put that in an executive order and do it like tomorrow? All right. Or should we wait to have something to shoot with when they actually do the dastardly deed? You guys say tomorrow. I could say, you guys don't like delayed gratification, do you?
We want it now.
Yeah.
Millennials. Millennials and older millennials.
The room has voted. How do you envision a just transition to renewable energy in which most economically marginalized retain jobs and fair pay?
We're talking now, obviously, Excel has a plan to close 2 coal plants down in Pueblo, right? Pretty exciting. Yes. And it's funny that it's got a lot of Republican opposition in the General Assembly. Yeah, I know it's hard for you guys to believe this, but this is a nonprofit, so I'm not taking one side or another, except in this one specific that. Well, the question I get asked, and the question I ask back to them, I think what it looks like is Excel is going to be able to close those 2 coal plants, go to a combination of wind, solar. They're going to spend some money on batteries, but almost a completely renewable transition, maybe a little bit of natural gas, and in doing that, they're going to lower the monthly electricity bill for consumers. Now, awesome. So now you're getting cleaner air and lower cost to your consumers. And I asked my Republican friends, which part of that don't you like? Just tell me which side. Which side is bothering you the most? Is it the lower cost to our citizens, or is it really that clean air that you're so frustrated by? Anyway, I think that's a sign of the times. And one thing that isn't, every person who works in one of those coal plants, we will have a job for them, and they will be making right at, if not right at, but close to what they were making in when they were in the electrical generation plant. And I think as a statewide policy, and this isn't just about the transition from one or another energy type into clean energy. This is about when we did outsourcing and what we're going to see with automation. But this whole country has to get a lot better at predicting which professions are going to get swallowed up or eliminated. And we need to be training people for the new jobs well before 2 years, 4 years before they lose their jobs. It's a big part of, I think, the divide between rural and urban suburban is because no one cared. No one, back in the 1980s and 1990s, these people they were left behind. They lost not just their jobs, but their way of life. And they felt that no one really cared. We should not ever let that happen again.
And things are changing at such a quick pace in so many ways. We need collective nimbleness, seriously, and to not let anybody not be part of it.
You heard it here first, collective nimbleness.
I know, I just made that up. What are some of the economic development strategies that the state is deploying or planning to deploy in order to support communities, you talked about this a little bit, impacted by the transition to a cleaner economy?
So we have a couple programs. We have accelerator grants for small businesses, and we give a preference to those companies that are in rural areas. We have what we call Jumpstart. And if you're starting a business in a rural part of the state of Colorado that's lagged behind the rest of the state's recovery, you can basically, if you join up with Jumpstart, you will go 5 years before you pay any taxes to the state of Colorado. So we are giving serious, real incentives to get people to move to the smaller communities. You know, it doesn't sound, and I think we've only created like 350 or 400 jobs through Jumpstart in the first few years. But if you look at these small towns, that's a lot of jobs, right? You add 15 jobs to a town with 800 people, that matters, and people really pay attention. We're also, we had enough of a budget surplus this year that we realistically now can say that by 2021, 2022 at the latest, we will have broadband in every single municipality in the state of Colorado.
Well, speaking of broadband, this question's from Twitter, hot off.
I was foreshadowing. My sister's an English teacher. She would call that foreshadowing.
Are there any future plans to convert any public schools to net zero campuses?
So Colorado is a local control state. So the state doesn't tell any school what to do. We can tell them exactly what to do, and then they smile politely and wave at us. I know of 3, I'll bet there are a dozen places where individual school districts, some of them very small, want to move into this type of campus and make a statement, and in that process, make it part of the education of their kids. And this, what we call experiential learning, where kids, I'm dyslexic, so I'm a very slow reader, and I have a moderate case of ADHD, which is not uncommon for people with dyslexic, which is really a cruel joke. If you think God smiling and saying, I'm going to make you a really slow reader, and then in addition, I'm going to give you a really short attention span. Let's see if you ever finish a book, right? But a lot of people like me learn by talking to people and by doing things, right, with my hands. And my brother's also moderately dyslexic, and he's an automobile mechanic, but also became a woodworker and then was able to fix stuff. He and his wife opened a bakery. But there's a whole universe out there of ways that schools, in how they make themselves, can make that process of transforming a campus into part of the curriculum. And we have a whole group of Colorado historians from most of our campuses that I've met with several times over the last 5 or 6 years, because I think our history around green energy and green jobs is significant in this state, and there are a lot of places where we never talk about it. The kids don't hear about it, and we teach kids Colorado history in 1 grade, right? I think it's 4th grade. That's it, right? Texas. Now, you ever go down there and see how much everybody in Texas loves Texas? It gives me a headache, just for the record, right? They're not that good, right? They're not that better than everybody else. And if you pulled out that magic piece of fabric, we're bigger. But I think one thing they do very well is they have 8 years. So 8 years of middle school, elementary, middle, and high school, kids in Texas learn about, everything they learn about is tied into Texas. And I think so we're talking to historians about what it would take to change our curriculum here in significant ways. And a big part of that is let's teach our kids about the cool innovations that we came up with around green technology and green jobs. It happened there, or it happened over here, and here's when it happened, and here's who did it.
Mm-hmm. Which just fuels their wanting to be a part of that.
Just fuels their wanting to go. I heard that.
So you talked about, is there any more live streaming, or do you want to take a question, live question? Anybody have a question?
They're all on mute.
Live streaming. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So the evolution of fracking.
Hold.
Yeah.
Pass them back a microphone.
Sorry. The evolution of fracking in the state has been quite remarkable. Weld County seems to be going nuts with it. How are you envisioning how fracking will roll out over the next 5 years, 10 years, and what influences are going to make it either grow rapidly or stay the same or possibly shrink?
Well, fracking is really just code for more oil and gas. And I think what you're describing is the confluence of two technology innovations. One is horizontal drilling. It's probably been more significant even than fracking in terms of allowing oil and gas companies to more successfully and at lower cost recover more hydrocarbons, especially natural gas. We would not have inexpensive natural gas. And I know a lot of people in this room look at that with a very jaundiced eye and say, we don't need any more natural gas. When you look, and I've spent a fair amount of time trying to assess the energy needs, not just of Colorado, but of this country and this hemisphere and the world. And if you really believe we're going to bring another 1.5 billion people out of poverty, which I hope we will do, is what we did in the last 12 years or 14 years. And to do that takes a certain amount of energy. I think what we're going to see is an increasing percentage and a large percentage of new energy being wind and solar, renewable energy. But I think we're still going to need a lot of natural gas for a while, right? I don't know how long, I don't have details of how long that is, but I think it's interesting. One of our large operators is BP, British Petroleum, they're producing a lot of natural gas, not just in Colorado, but across the country. They're also the largest wind producer in the world. So that kind of confluence, I think what the real future, I like what Bill Gates said. What we want is an energy system in our future that is as reliable as the one we have now, as inexpensive and maybe even less expensive, and completely clean. Right? Those are our three North Stars. We want to keep constantly getting cleaner, constantly holding our costs or maybe even getting cheaper, and we want to make sure we don't lose that reliability that we kind of become accustomed to. And at least for a while, horizontal drilling and fracking is going to be part of that way to get natural gas out. And what we did in Colorado, we're the only state in America where we sat down and said, all right, if we're going to have all this natural gas, and certainly the action of fracking and certainly the producing of natural gas, there were fugitive emissions. And a guy named Fred Krupp sat down with me in 2012 in Davos in the World Economic Forum and said, how can you allow this to happen? And I said, well, we'd never get the oil and gas companies to do that. Well, it turned out, when I sat down and talked to them, and I said, well, you guys would never do this, but I think sooner or later you're going to have to own up to the fugitive emissions and what it's doing to the brown cloud, what it's doing to the air quality in Colorado. And this one CE goes, no, we do that. We'll take that on. And I looked at him and said, you would? He said, well, we don't want a lot of red tape. We don't want bureaucracy. We want to make sure every dollar that goes to making the air cleaner, and we'd like to get some credit for it. We don't want all the credit to go to the environmental community. And that's sort of how that happened, right? That was where we got all the environmental community put together their scientists, and the industry, oil and gas industry, put in their scientists, and they fought for a while. It was like having two cats in a bag, right? It was pretty intense, and they were fighting over what the research paper said and how much of this pollution is true and how much. But after about 4 or 5 months, they got to common terms that they all agreed to, and then if you look at it. And this was a voluntary, we didn't have to pass a vote, but the oil and gas industry agreed to spend $60 million a year. And they took, it's the equivalent of 300,000 cars off the road. That's sort of, I think we've got to set those high standards for ourselves that we're constantly getting cleaner. But recognize that, there are an awful lot of people on this planet that don't have any energy at all. And that, we've got to make sure, even as we're cleaning up our environment, we don't want to deny them a future.
So, okay, time for one more question, I think. Oh, go ahead.
We can do 2 more questions. Don't want to cut them off. I'll be quick.
2 more questions.
I'll be
2 more
concise for
questions.
once.
It takes me a minute to get up, but I lived in Colorado since 1969. Moved here from, big city of Chicago. And things have changed quite a bit over the time that I've been alive. Okay. What is? Sorry, I
pretend you're singing.
You don't want to hear that. What I see today is something that I never saw before in my life, and that is, it's a nice homogeneous audience here. It's great. But unfortunately, when you get out beyond this location, and especially in your state, you have a group of people, two groups of people that don't agree on the same facts. And I think today we also see that objectives aren't common. It used to be when common objectives, you can reach compromises. So I think that this is a big obstacle for the state and for you as governor in your remaining time as chief executive of the state. And I'd like to know what you think we can do about that.
It's a great question, and certainly, you know, I was talking about the rural, urban, suburban divide. That's a big part of it. I think our political campaigns, the attack ads, the negative ads, are, you know, a big part of that. I thought we were going to get through the Democratic primaries for governor, at least, and not have any negative ads. But, and you think about it, you never see it. You don't see attack ads, or rarely do you see them in business, right? In the private. I mean, Coca-Cola and Pepsi hate each other, right? They hate each other. You never see Coke do an attack ad against Pepsi because it would work. Pepsi's sales would go down. Pepsi would have no choice but to do an attack ad against Coke. Coke's sales would go down. They'd attack Pepsi. Pepsi would attack Coke. You would depress sales in the entire product category of soft drinks. We're depressing the product category of democracy, which demands that people talk to each other. And I think probably, and you know, when I was in the restaurant business up the street, when people got really upset, the lesson was that if you want to calm someone down, repeat their same words back to them. They feel validated, they feel heard. And if you're trying to persuade someone, even more, listen, right? Hear what they're saying, ask them about why they think that, where their thoughts come from. And I think if we could make that a cultural norm, where we didn't try to tell people why we're right and why they're wrong, but just kept listening to where they're coming from with their wrong facts. They got them from somewhere, and I think you have to kind of back down the staircase and get down to a place where you do find some common facts, and then say, all right, how do we determine what fair facts are? I mean, we've gone through this kind of stuff before, right? Right before the Civil War, in the late 1890s, there was, you know, a lot of yellow journalism. It was hard for people to tell what the facts were, but it sucks. Last question.
Okay, one more. There was one more question. Go ahead.
The term collaboration was brought up, and I would like to hear your ideas on getting to a clean air environment by a culture of personal action being the collaboration involving everybody, not just pointing to organizations, but making it a culture like in World War II when we did all the belt tightening?
I think that's a great question. And it's funny, Mayor Hancock kind of didn't dress me down, but he pointed out that when I came back from an economic development trip to Japan in 2005, they had just started something called Cool Biz. And in the summer, in Japan, in Tokyo, which is hot, everybody in the summer they get rid of their neckties and they get rid of their coats, and they use less air conditioning. They just turn their thermostats up a little bit. So we did that, and he's still doing it. And I dropped the ball at the state. So I am meeting with all my cabinet tomorrow. I am serious. And that's one way to do it. Another thing is to try and find things that we can all do that make sense, like plant a tree on the south side of a building or plant a tree along the street. You know, my mom grew up in the Depression, and she would wash tinfoil and saran wrap and reuse it. She'd tape it to her refrigerator door. I swear to gosh. And everything. You know, what she said, she said, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. And to a certain extent, we need to think that way in terms of how we consume energy and how we consume stuff, right? All the descriptions of these masses of plastic in the oceans and killing whales and other large fish and mammals. That's something we can all do. And I think we've been trying to think of how do we start something that empowers personal responsibility. We haven't quite come up with it, but we need a branding, some way to be able to talk about it, and then some way to go out and get the media to promote it as just aggregated and fractured as it is. But it's a great point. Thank you.
All right, everybody, and that's a wrap up. And
we just want to thank Governor Hickenlooper for joining us and being part of this important event tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank
Please
you very much. Thank you
give a
all.
round of applause. Thank you very much.
I'll take care.
Thank you very much. Please stick around because our panel is starting. Everybody, please take your seats. We are about to start our panel presentation.
Okay, are you ready to dive back in, everybody? Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, I don't need it. If somebody else needs that, that's fine too. Would you guys prefer? Okay. So now, now the governor's left, we can get into the real details. No, I'm just kidding. But the rest of the evening is an opportunity truly to dive in, right, to the details of the Colorado Climate Plan. And we have an awesome panel who has so much knowledge amongst the three of them that literally, I think I was sent like page after page of questions that they could just answer off the cuff, which was incredibly impressive. But I'm going to let them all introduce themselves really quickly. But we have tonight Taryn Finnessy, who is the Senior Specialist of Climate Change at Department of Natural Resources. All right. Martha Rudolph, who is the Director of Environmental Programs at CDPHE. And Kathleen Stacks, who, as the governor said earlier, is the Executive Director of the Colorado Energy Office. And collectively, they have just so many years of experience in this field. Each come at it from a little bit of a different angle. But how about a quick introduction? Taryn, you want to start?
There we go. Can you hear me now? Thank you, Beth. I'm Taryn Fennessy. Like Beth said, I'm with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, and I coordinate the climate change program across state agencies. And so I was the one that was coordinating the development of the Colorado Climate Plan, both back in 2014 when it first came out, and again when we redid it this year. I get the privilege of working with these women every single week, which is awesome. And I just want to point out how awesome it is to be on a panel with all women. It's a rare occurrence for me. So,
Martha.
Good evening. I'm Martha Rudolph. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs, and it is great to be on a panel with all women. How often does that happen? My purview is all the regulated programs, air, water, waste. I also have a sustainability group that I oversee that largely does restaurant inspections, if you can believe that. So these are all the regulatory programs that are either delegated or authorized by the federal government under the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, RCRA. We have a CERCLA group. That's not a delegated program, but we do Superfund cleanups as well, and as well as a number of other things, but basically the regulatory programs.
And I'm Kathleen Stacks. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Energy Office, and would like to recognize that I have several of my amazing staff in attendance tonight. So when you see them, give them a big high five. At the Energy Office, we have the luxury of not being a regulatory agency, which makes our existence in some ways much better and easier, because we get to play a lot in this collaborative, facilitating wide stakeholder group type space to have some of the harder conversations about energy policy. And really, I think, echoing some of the governor's comments earlier, trying to get people in a room to have conversations who don't typically sit in a room and have conversations. We're the ones holding the bag with the cats. But we also we have a lot of energy efficiency programs spanning everything from our low-income and residential energy services to our commercial and industrial services. We have a transportation fuels and technology group that does a lot of work with electric vehicles, and as well as compressed natural gas vehicles across the state. And then we have a public affairs group that covers a lot of our outreach, and that's where a lot of that cat bag holding occurs, as well as our work at the PUC. And so we engage quite a bit there on the regulatory side of things. Have been very engaged with Excel on the Colorado Energy Plan, as well as other issues with others of our investor-owned utilities. And then everything else sort of in the production and generation space. So everything from geothermal to hydropower to my new favorite, photovoltaics, which I can talk about later. So.
Well, maybe we should go right to that. Okay, so, well, actually, to that point, first topic tonight is emissions, and which is, I think, most topics, unfortunately, we live every single day, but this one is certainly timely with Excel's announcement earlier this week, last week. Sorry, I've lost track of time. But just in general, right, the broad effort to reduce emissions in our electricity and transportation sectors for the benefit of both climate and public health. So I think, Kathleen, this first question's for you. What are the ways the state can accelerate the adoption of renewable energy in the electricity sector beyond the closing of Comanche 1 and 2, and specifically for areas in Colorado that are not serviced by investor-owned utilities? Did I set that up right for you in terms of what you want to talk about?
We'll go with it. We do a lot of work with our co-ops and our municipal utilities across the state to try to find ways to make it cost-effective to provide more renewable energy, which can be a challenge in many places. And I think one of the areas that I think is really worth noting that we've been spending quite a bit of time on is in our low-income sector. We've been trying to develop more community solar and rooftop solar that's accessible for our low-income community programs through our low-income and residential services. So both through our direct weatherization services as well as our sort of broader residential services, trying to find ways to engage with utilities to offer more solar opportunities to our low-income customers across the state. That will both increase the amount of renewable energy on the system, as well as make those energy sources more affordable to those customers who have a harder time affording and would otherwise not be able to take advantage of some of this cleaner energy without some of these additional programs. So I think there's certainly focusing on things like that. I think working, of course, with the legislature on trying to identify policy and legislative opportunities to break down barriers for utilities and limits for utilities that can restrict some of the renewable energy that they can bring online. I think there's a lot of different places that we can work, and everything that we do through our programs is focusing on finding cost-effective, innovative, clean energy for our consumers.
And I think this may be one also, Kathleen, for you, but maybe for Martha too. And the governor talked a bit about this space earlier, and I thought he was going to announce something right here tonight, but apparently not. We have to wait. But what programs are helping to improve mobility at the same time as we are promoting transportation, electrification, and whoever wants to take that?
Do you want me to
Martha?
take it? We actually have quite a few efforts in this space. We work very closely with the Regional Air Quality Council. Did I get that right? One in a row. To fund infrastructure for electric vehicles across the state. And this is, we get both funding through the electric vehicle registration fees as well as the Department of Transportation. And then we're going to be using a significant portion of the VW mitigation funds to fund electric vehicle infrastructure, both at community levels and focusing primarily on our interstate corridors to make sure that people can travel across the state without that fear of running out of battery while they're driving from Denver to Grand Junction. So we're focusing a lot of effort on that. We've got an RFA out right now for proposals from companies to actually electrify big chunks of those corridors. So we're very excited about that. We're also working with 7 other states in the West to identify collaboration opportunities so that we can electrify our corridors in sort of a coordinated way. So having consistent spacing between stations or consistent signage for identifying where those charging stations actually are, and really trying to make sure that among these, both Democratic and in this agreement, 6 out of the 8 are Republican states that are all in agreement and working together to find a consistent way to let people drive across the West in their electric vehicles is a really exciting effort.
So I would just add to that. I guess I don't have to hold it that close. Eat it. I would add to that on the Volkswagen settlement, we have a mitigation plan that's out, and if you get on our website, you can see all the various things that we are proposing to fund. The most that we can spend is 15% of those funds for electrification charging stations, basically, and we're funding the full 15%, which is about $10.3 million, which isn't a great deal of money to build out charging stations in all the corridors that we want them, but it's a start, and we're hoping that will just sort of energize local governments and maybe some of the utilities to join in this and help build out the infrastructure.
Great. It would be amazing to drive across the West and not worry about having to charge. Or being able to charge. So Martha, I think this one's for you. So switching gears just a little bit, how is the state helping the most vulnerable populations that live near industrial sites with the greatest air pollution?
Thanks, that's a great question. This has really been a thorny issue for us. And for those of you that have been involved with this issue, I think it can be very frustrating to participate or to find out about things that we're doing after the fact, or where you don't really feel like you have a voice in some of the decisions that we make. So I want to talk about what we're trying to do to bring the vulnerable communities into the decision-making that we have, which largely involve issuing permits, issuing licenses, perhaps some rulemaking activities, which we recognize can be viewed as very closed opportunities for people if you do find out about them. So one thing that we've done is that we have a health equity and environmental justice group. We've had this office in our department for a number of years, but it's only been in the last couple of years that environmental justice has really become a focus of that group. So our divisions are working very closely to try to figure out how can we best communicate, do outreach for communities to get them involved in the decision making or to at least get them involved in understanding and knowing about the decisions. So, for example, one of the things that we've just recently done, we had a hearing down in Colorado Springs about the Drake plant. And we knew that was very controversial, and there were a lot of people in the Colorado Springs area that were very concerned about it. And we knew that it's located in an EJ area. Many of these, as you all know, many of these kind of industrial facilities are located in EJ areas for a variety of reasons. And certainly the Drake plant is one of them. So what we did is we did outreach to the community. We had our written documents in Spanish as well as in English, and we had translators come to the meeting with headphones so they could translate what the proceedings were into Spanish. Now, this is going to be it was a lessons learned moment for us because nobody came that needed translation services. We thought about it. We're again working with our office, and we realized that the way we reach out to the community is not a way to get the community to want to participate. So we're going to look at going to community centers, to churches, to try to talk to them, to the local communities where they may be more comfortable hearing from us, as opposed to coming to the city council building, at 7 o'clock at night, which, if you really think about it, who wants to come to the city council meeting at 7 o'clock at night for a meeting? So that's one thing. The other thing I think we need to do a better job is really communicating what does that participation look like and how effective can it be? And this is something that has been very frustrating to us because we can only do what we've got the jurisdiction to do, what we have the authority to do that's given to us by the legislature. And unfortunately, it doesn't include a lot of flexibility in many of the actions that we take. We also are restricted with the resources that the legislature gives us on what the capacity is, what our personnel is, what our funding is. And so what we need to do is try to reach out to these communities and let them know what is our flexibility, what can we do, and what we cannot do just because of the limitations on our authority. So I do want to say that we recognize that this can be enormously frustrating. We're trying to learn from our experiences, and we are trying to reach out to the community and to do a better job.
So I saw a couple of confused faces when you used the term EJ. Do you want to just explain what that is?
Sorry, environmental justice. I apologize for that. Environmental justice. It's basically what it might sound like is that there are communities, vulnerable communities out there that are more adversely affected by, in this case, environmental issues than your more well-off community.
Great, thanks. So switching topics for a second, extreme weather events. Colorado knows something about this. Certainly also, unfortunately, a timely topic. But our state, continues to experience them, whether it's wildfire, drought, floods. They affect our health, the health of our residents and our environment. So what, I guess just to start, what forest management practices is the state adopting to help reduce devastating wildfires? Timely question.
Yes. I also manage the state's drought program, so I've been spending a lot of time talking about drought and wildfires lately. So, I think one of the things we know about Colorado is that we're warming. And we are not entirely certain what's going to happen with precipitation, but we know that going forward, heat is enough of a driver that it can dry things out. And healthy forests, healthy watersheds are less susceptible to fire. And ecosystems that have access to water or that are healthy play a big role in our watersheds and delivering clean, healthy water to our populations. And so all of these things are intertwined, and we've learned a lot over the last 18 years because we've been a lot drier, and we've seen drought a lot more frequently in the last 18 years. So we have looked at different management practices, both in the watersheds and in the forests. For a long time, there was a management practice of suppression in our forests, and that actually led to some large scale fires in the West. Those practices are changing. We're going in, we're doing some controlled burns, we're thinning forests in a way that is healthy for the ecosystems. Forests are a natural part of the West, and in a normal year in Colorado, we have hundreds of fires. And so it's not a bad thing. They're actually an amazing amount of regeneration and growth comes out of natural fires, but what we don't want to have happen are these large-scale scorching fires that then result in hydrophobic soils, and then we get precipitation events like we're going to get in the next week on burn scars that then cause flooding. And so they're all interconnected. And so we've been really focusing. The Colorado Water Plan actually had a huge focus on watershed health and making sure that we have healthy watersheds. These are most of our watersheds in Colorado are in forested ecosystems, and maintaining healthier watersheds actually reduces flood events, or can reduce flood risk. It holds more soil, which can absorb more water. And then also those healthy soils and those healthy trees are less susceptible to fire when we dry out, and there's a really strong correlation between drought and fire, as you could expect. So we have a huge amount of money. I think it's $5 million just this year going. That's a huge amount of money when you start talking about watershed health, I guess. Unfortunately, it's not a huge amount of money in any other realm. But going to the communities, and it's being driven by the community level. We have these community watershed groups that are driving how we create these and establish these healthy watersheds and these healthy forests. We've been working with our federal partners to look at how we can manage the large percentage of Colorado that isn't owned by the state of Colorado. It's federal lands. And so we're working on a number of these practices right now to help reduce the impact. We know we're gonna have fires, we're gonna have droughts, we're gonna have floods in Colorado. We have a variable climate. We know those events are gonna happen. So it's all about lessening the impacts when they do actually happen.
Thanks. So related to water, how is the state addressing the need to store more water? Given the issues and impact and hearty dialogue, right, that we've had historically in the state about increasing either the existing size of reservoirs or building new ones?
Sure. You guys got easy questions.
I was just thinking the same thing. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Next easy one's for you, I promise.
So it's a balance, right? I mean, Colorado's growing. We need water to grow. We're a semi-arid state. On average, we get about 14 inches of precipitation. Those of you who are not from Colorado, which I'm guessing is a fair number of you, may have come from wetter areas. I myself grew up in New England, and we get on average about 45 to 50 inches of rain a year. And so it's a big change. It's part of what drives why people love Colorado, right? 300 plus sunny days a year. You can't really have sunny days if you're raining all the time. And so it's a balance between meeting the needs of this rapidly growing population, maintaining our agricultural heritage, which, depending on how you slice it, is either our number 1 or 2 economic driver within the state of Colorado, but then also preserving the environment that so many of us love to play in, and keeping these healthy ecosystems and healthy watersheds so that we are less susceptible to these extreme events, which are just horrific and life-shattering and costly. And so it's a really big balance on how do we do that? How do we use less and do more? Denver Water is actually using less water now than they were in the 1980s, despite I think either doubling or tripling their service area population. And so technology is a big piece of using less and doing more. We've seen the same with our agricultural communities. But at the end of the day, we don't currently have enough water in Colorado to meet the projected demands out to 2050. We call it the gap, and we're looking at different ways of meeting the gap. There's some innovations that have happened within the state of Colorado over the last over the last decade. In 2002, the city of Aurora was just weeks away from running out of water as a result of the drought that happened there. They said, we're growing, we need water now, and we don't even have time to go through this federal permitting process, which takes 15, 20 years. We need to come up with an innovative water project now. And so they came up with the Prairie Waters Project, and there's elements of reuse in it, but there's also elements of using gravel pits to hold water. They didn't actually have to build large-scale reservoirs. Through reuse, through efficiency, through kind of basic technologies, they were able to really increase their water supply so that in 2012 and also this year, their population, which has continued to just explode, they don't actually have to implement restrictions because they have sufficient water to meet their demands. And that project from conception to operations was less than 10 years. And so I think we can look to our neighbors just within Colorado to find innovative ways to meet our needs and to try to find solutions.
A great charge to everybody, actually, in terms of really thinking creatively and innovatively about water storage, even forest health for that matter, but certainly water storage. How can we do it differently than we've done before? Maybe not have the same discussions over and over. Okay, so some questions from the audience, some from live streaming. Oh wait, hold on. I've got these first, and then we'll open it up. Anyone jump in? What is being done to ensure the safety of vulnerable areas impacted by fracking, such as those outlined? God, again with my glasses. Outlined in Prop 97. I think that's what that says. Is that what that says? Yes. Thank you.
I guess that's me. As the non-regulatory agency sitting up here, I actually, before I started at the Colorado Energy Office, I worked at the Department of Natural Resources and did
Which
mostly
is also
oil
a
and gas.
non-regulatory agency, sort of.
Well, I worked mostly with the regulatory agency. So. And I think one of the interesting sort of dynamics with our various regulatory agencies in the state is that we have different focuses in different places. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is primarily tasked with the sort of mechanics of the drilling operations, the wellbore casing, the other engineering type things that I'm not an expert in. And then the Department of Public Health and Environment is much more focused on the environmental regulation aspects of energy development. I think what the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is tasked with doing is ensuring, to the extent that it can, is that the drilling is happening safely for communities. And certainly there is a very healthy dialogue about how close drilling should occur to communities. I think, one of the interesting things when you work in this space is that you can find a study to support any position that you can dream of. And so again, when it comes to different perspectives, I think you can very easily find different experts who will argue a lot of different places. So Colorado is obviously a place where this is happening in a very sort of present and obvious way, because the oil and gas resources and the communities are existing in the same place. And so this is going to continue to be an issue. I think we're going to continue to see this dialogue as we go into elections. We're going to continue to see requests of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to do more. We're going to see requests of the state to direct the COGCC to do more. The legislature is obviously paying very close attention to this. We see bills every single year to do more in this space as well. And I think we have to balance a lot of different things. Obviously, safety is number one. We have to balance economies. We have to balance the way our environment and our other natural resource demands are, and there's a lot of different pieces to this, but I think the safety of our communities is obviously of utmost importance, and we've got some really, I think, talented and skilled people on staff who pay attention to this and try to ensure that we have the best regulations that we can.
If I can add excuse me, if I can add to that. We do look, taking what the governor said, which is that fracking is really not just really about fracking, but about all the things associated with oil and gas development. So it's the air quality, it's the water quality, it's the nuisance factor that's part of this as well. So we obviously have regulations, air quality regulations for permitting oil and gas activities. Surface water, if there's any kind of surface water discharge, we will regulate that. Groundwater is not ours. It's a fluke of the statutes. But we work very closely with the COGCC if there's a groundwater issue. The one thing I did want to point out is that a couple years ago, we started a program in the health department where if individuals in a community or community as a whole had a concern about potential health impacts that they might be experiencing, like if they're getting headaches or runny noses or bloody noses or whatever it is, they can call. We've got a hotline that they can call, not for medical advice. It's manned by medical professionals, but the purpose of it is to gather information about that particular area. If there seems to be enough concern coming in from that regional area or that geographic area, we have a van that is manned or has air monitoring equipment in it, and we will send that van out and we will do monitoring of that area to see if there are problems with air emissions that are coming off, and if there are, we will talk to the operator and see if we can get something fixed. At this point, we've sent the van out, I couldn't tell you exactly how many times, but a number of times, and we will also talk to the people that have experienced concerns about their concerns. But again, we can't give them medical advice, but we try to gather this information to have basically a collection so that perhaps we could do something if there's an issue that we can handle that.
Okay, thanks. So different topic, back to transportation, electric transportation. So Awesome Taxi Company in Grand Junction, going all electric by 2020. So good shout out again. When will Colorado's fleets, transit, and government vehicles be all electric? I don't know who can answer that.
You want to take that from a green and government standpoint, or do you want me to go for it?
I'll start.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different efforts to this. One of the sort of drivers behind this is the electric vehicle plan that my office put out, but worked very closely with the Department of Public Health and Environment, the Department of Transportation, Regional Air Quality Council. I had it right. And I know I'm missing others, but it was a big collaborative effort to identify goals to not only electrify corridors across the state, but to increase the uptake of electric vehicles across the state as well. And so there's strategies and actions identified for the state, and setting pretty aggressive goals to increase the number of electric vehicles here in the state, including our state fleet. And so right now we've identified actually some process challenges that we're trying to, but believe it or not, there's some bureaucracy at the state level when it comes to procurement. So we're looking at things like that trying to actually break down some of these barriers, find ways to collect more data about the use of electric vehicles in the state. What of our fleet is appropriate for replacement? Not everything is at this point, given some of the restrictions that we have as far as where electric vehicle charging stations are located, but identifying which ones can we replace now, where should we be locating charging stations across the state to enable the fleet that again operates in all 64 counties, to be able to increase the number of electric vehicles in our state fleet. And then I'll let you talk a little bit about transit, if somebody else talk about transit.
Go for it. I want to talk about transit.
Okay, I'll talk. Where's Mike?
It's the next question too. So,
transit. We do have some of the VW money, which I'm now going to. I guess so. I'm going to be speaking out of my lane here a little bit. There is some VW money. Where's Chris Colclaser when we need him? That is going to take some of our diesel buses off the roads and replace them with electric buses or compressed natural gas buses or propane, but really cleaner. Where are we? Which one?
Could be any one of these.
Could be any. Fleet is part of the solution. But it's really, I think, working with communities too to both inform them of the opportunities and to help them build the infrastructure to allow this. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is why I have all this paper in my lap, because I knew I'm not going to be able to know this off the top of my head. So this is the mitigation plan that we have for the VW money, and it's talking about well, the one that you're really interested in is the VW settlement. All the states get a certain amount of money based upon it's a formula based upon the number of VW vehicles that were sold in the state. And Colorado actually had a fair number of VW vehicles, and so we had $63 million that are coming to us. It's about $68 million. So we'll distribute approximately $18 million, or 26% of its initial allocation, to replace Class 4 to 8 transit buses with alternative fuel, CNG, propane, hybrid, or electric vehicles, and to install charging infrastructure associated with new electric transit buses. This is in addition to the $10.3 million that I talked about before that's going to the charging stations themselves. So we are trying to devote a fair amount of money that as much as we can from the VW settlement, to looking at alternative fuel vehicles, including electric vehicles. So we're all working on this. The charging stations, there's a number of state departments that have installed charging stations where they can. Part of the issue is either you don't own the building, so you have to work with the owner of the building, which we have, and we have a number of charging stations at my department. You have to work with space, which is an issue when parking, particularly downtown, is a premium. So as Kathleen was saying, there's a number of logistical issues that have to be worked out, bureaucracy issues that have to be worked out. But this is an ongoing conversation that we're having on how we can add more electric vehicles to the state fleet system, and then how can we provide incentives and or just funds, either through the RAC, the Regional Air Quality Council, which is what we were talking about, or through the Energy Office, or through the VW funds. How can we leverage money to increase both the state use of electric vehicles and provide access to charging stations, so that you guys who have electric vehicles or will be more apt to buy an electric vehicle.
Great, thank you. Anybody here have an electric vehicle? Yeah, that's what I figured. That's awesome. So we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Right here. Okay, yeah.
We learned a really tough lesson when President Trump was elected about what can happen when a hostile president takes over and ruins all the programs of his predecessor. So my question to you guys, after hearing about these marvelous initiatives, what are you doing to embed them in a way so that the next governor cannot destroy them?
So one of the focuses of the Colorado Climate Plan since we did it in 2014 has been institutionalizing climate change in state agencies, and just having it be another layer of decision making. So, all of our agencies think about population growth and we think about budget. Those are just things that we think about as part of our decision making process. And so there's this idea of how do we institutionalize climate change into state agency operations. And I think we've come a long way. A lot of the stuff we're talking about happens at programmatic levels. It doesn't necessarily happen at a cabinet level where those people are political appointees. There are folks like myself who are not at-will employees that will be able to carry on these programs regardless of who the next governor is. So I think we have done a lot to do that. I also think that we've seen a shift. Under under the Obama administration, it was really easy for the state of Colorado to kind of follow on the coattails of the federal government and the programs that they had, because they were offering a lot of different programs. When those programs started to go away, we saw a big shift, and we saw the need for leadership both at the state level but at the local level. There's been a huge upsurge in local level engagement in Colorado, but also nationally. And we are working really closely. In fact, we are mandated in the executive order to work really closely with our local governments on implementing climate change initiatives and helping them implement or achieve their goals. Because we recognize at the state, in the state of Colorado, we are a local control state. And so there are things that jurisdictionally the state can't control. And there are things that the local governments can't control. So if we're going to achieve our goals and they're going to achieve theirs, we need to work collaboratively together. And so I think the momentum of all of those things has actually been really beneficial over the last 2 years. There's way more local momentum happening now. There's more momentum happening at the state level. And so I think there are things that we can move forward. We also talk a lot about resilience. And this is a term that actually resonates really well at the federal level right now. And so there's actually a study about to go underway about how we institutionalize resilience in state agencies. It's being led actually by the Colorado Recovery and Resilience Office, which is a subset of our Department of Local Affairs. And embedded in that is climate change because of these extreme events. And so I think you don't have to, I mean, Brenna was right, go vote. But at the same time, I think a lot of this is happening at a staff level and can proceed regardless of what happens with the administration. Sometimes you have to change the semantics. Sometimes you have to work things a little differently. I worked for the EPA under the Bush administration. Like, you have to get creative at times. But that doesn't necessarily mean that things have to come to a standstill.
I will just very quickly add businesses. There's a lot of businesses out there that are recognizing and are promoting projects that support initiatives related to climate change and that are doing their own thing for sustainability and are really out there leading the charge. And so I think that whole shift, so the local governments, the states doing it, and then the businesses that are picking it up are going to make it more difficult for someone to come in at the state level at least and just reverse things.
And I'll just add to that, it's the employees of businesses that will make it really challenging for businesses to walk away from it, which is great. So, so that is, I'm sorry, I know I've been told I've got to cut us off, which I know we could all ask questions and talk for hours. Just lightning round before we end. So many like dedicated, awesome people in the crowd. What's one action that you would ask the audience to take to help move the needle on climate change?
Vote.
Took the word right out of my mouth. Yeah, vote and talk to other people about it. Share what you know, get them to vote.
And I'll keep it political. Engage with your local communities. Engage with your local elected officials. Make sure that they know what your priorities are and your needs are. Even my office is embarking upon a big outreach effort to engage more with local communities and understand what their energy goals are. And if they're not hearing from their constituents, they're not going to be able to fully represent what your interests are. And so I would encourage vote and be active at those levels.
And can I just add to that? I know it's a lightning round, but I'm going to add it really quickly. So the Yale Climate Change Center did this really fascinating study where they surveyed Americans all the way down to the county level, and they asked, do you believe in regulating greenhouse gases as emissions? It was overwhelming percentage said yes. It's something like 70% within Colorado. I think nationally it's even in the high 60s. And are you concerned about the impacts of climate change? Yes, it was well above 50%. If you say for future generations, it goes even higher. And then they said, do you talk to people about climate change? And Colorado had one of the highest percentages at about 32%. So seldom do problems ever get solved if people are not talking about them. So just echoing kind of what we are saying, talk to people about it. It doesn't matter. I think people forget if people don't want to sound stupid and they get mired in the details. But heck, I've tripped over my words like 17 times up here, and you guys are all still sitting here. So people will sit and listen to you if you engage with them and you talk to them. So talk about it.
Awesome, thank you. So thank you to the panel of strong, awesome, incredibly experienced and talented, smart women. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your passion, your ideas. Thanks, everybody. I'll turn it over to Sandra.
Well, thank you, Beth. That was a great conversation. My name is Sandra Halvatzis. I am the Director of Programs here at the Alliance Center. On behalf of the Alliance Center and E2, I would like to thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you, Beth, for your moderation. Thank you to our panelists for your leadership on climate issues in our beautiful state. Thank you to our governor for being part of this great event. And thank you to our donors, because you are making these events happen. You are bringing government and communities together to talk about important issues to move the climate agenda forward. We all came here to talk about ways to move our Colorado climate plan from strategy to reality. And we heard about great initiatives at the state level. Aside from that, we all have to realize that moving from strategy to reality has to start with us. It starts when we come together as community and decide that beyond our doubts and differences, we can make our vision a reality. It starts when we bring underserved communities to the table and when we make them part of our policy and planning processes. It starts when we learn more about what equity, diversity, and inclusion really mean for us on a personal and on a professional level. It starts when we register to vote, when we vote and engage with our local leaders. It starts when we make bold commitments to act on climate change. I encourage all of you to make bold commitments to act on climate change. Tweet them, use the hashtag #COClimateAction. We would love to hear about what kind of changes in your behavior you are making so that you can reduce your carbon footprint while making an impact in your community. I am pretty sure that together we can build a future where our communities are stronger, our economy thrives, and our planet is healthy. Thank you very much for being here. Have a great evening.